Okay, I am so happy that you all are here at this panel. We have some wonderful panelists here to tell you more about biotech. Before we get started, I want to learn a little bit more about this room. Raise your hand if you're an undergrad, and raise your hand if you're a grad student, and then alumni. Is that the section? Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, good. I think it's good for us to know, I think, who we're speaking to. Let me introduce our panelists. So first we have Jane Chisholm here. She is a senior scientist at Graybug. She did her PhD in chemical and biomolecular engineering at Johns Hopkins. Right next to her we have McClure, who actually is a graduate of UW Chemical Engineering with a bachelor's degree. She currently works as a senior scientist at Biotherapeutics, and she used to be a senior associate scientist at Amgen. And finally we have Amanda Pace, who is the associate director of late-stage process development at Juno Therapeutics, or maybe cell gene, according to your LinkedIn. And she has her bachelor's and master's in chemical and biomolecular engineering, also from Hopkins. So first I wanted to ask if each of you could briefly describe your career trajectory, so what got you to the job you are in today, and then if you could spend a couple sentences describing your job today, what a day-to-day looks like.
Do we go first? Go ahead. Okay. So when I was getting my bachelor's at Hopkins, I still was kind of unsure of what I wanted to do. So I forced my way into the master's program and into a lab to kind of do some work there and kind of figure out what I wanted. And that kind of sparked the interest in drug delivery, drug development. And I'm from originally the Bay Area, so I kind of knew I wanted to end up back on that side of the world. And Hopkins had a really nice connection with Genentech, actually. So through some connections, I was able to kind of actually network, meet some people, get my resume around, and kind of join a late-stage formulation group. And I worked there for about 10 years doing formulation development. It's like very chemistry heavy focused. It's not necessarily kind of traditional chemical engineering. And then what really got me to Juno Cell Gene BMS was the opportunity to do some global work. I was like, oh, I've kind of done this, I've developed a drug, I know what that looks like, but I'm kind of ready to see it implemented and see that patients actually get it. And so what really sparked my interest in the role up here was that. And cell therapy, I think we've all kind of heard rumblings of that and what that could look like. And so that brought me up here. I've been doing that for about 2 years. And then I decided I missed development. And so I kind of went back. Startups are cool, they're pretty flexible. And so I was able to kind of end up back in the development group, kind of leading a team. And then you wanted the day-to-day?
Yeah, what do your day-to-day look like?
Well, I lead a development team that's very heavily in the lab. I'm not really in lab much. We kind of review data, strategy, things like that. My day is a lot of meetings, to be perfectly honest. Working with other teams kind of cross-functionally, looking at data one day, deciding what lab space is going to look like another day. It's kind of varied like that, but still very science, data focused.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Megan? So I started first at Amgen, and really I started through an internship. And it was an internship that actually my roommate boarded me. She was in the biochemistry department, and it wasn't one they sent to the chemical engineering department. But she's like, I think you'd like this. You take this one. So I applied for it and I got it. And the internship went great. But I was actually interning in their pilot plant, which was out in Malta at the time. And so it was kind of more on the manufacturing side and doing analytical to support the manufacturing. And then I graduated and I had grand plans of traveling. But then Amgen called and offered me a job. So I did that instead and traveled on the side. But so I started working at Amgen in their purification process development group. So I was developing purification processes for antibodies for use of human therapeutics. And I ended up staying at Amgen for about 11 years until they decided to pull out of Seattle. And I decided not to go with them. And so my current company is born out of some executives from Amgen that decided to start their own company. And their mission is to try to make biotherapeutics cheaper, more accessible. They're pretty expensive at the moment. So that's currently our mission. Though we were just acquired by Biotech, so I don't know what our current name is now, but we're still working on that part. And then, so my day-to-day, I'm still in the lab a bit, but I do spend quite a bit of time in meetings too. I lead projects, both as a purification lead and then moving into a project lead role as well. We do process development, scaling up to clinical, and we're currently building manufacturing sites.
Perfect, thank you. Jane?
So I, similar to Amanda, I did my undergrad at Hopkins in chemical engineering and also didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I started working in a lab my senior year and I was liking it and I decided to, Hopkins has this, it's kind of like a 5-year BSMS program. So it's kind of easy to stay one more year and get a master's and you work in the lab. So I was doing that. And during that time, I decided, oh, I really like this. I think I want to do a PhD, but it was too late to apply for that cycle. And my advisor was like, why don't you just stay here? So I ended up not finishing my master's and just kind of joining the PhD program. So I did my PhD at Hopkins, and I did drug delivery work, specifically focusing on the lung, but my lab worked in a number of different areas. And I knew I didn't want to stay in academia, and I was really interested in working more at a startup. I was interested in the smaller, kind of fast-paced environment, and I knew I didn't want to just do the same thing every day, which might be my misconception of a big pharma company, but that was what, at least my thought process at the time. So I was mainly looking at smaller companies, and then an opportunity came up to work at my current company, Graybug Vision. It was actually founded by my advisor from grad school, and so I did not want to work there originally because I wanted to do something different. I wanted to distance myself, but take advantage of those opportunities is probably the biggest advice I can give, because it was a great opportunity and I'm really glad that I took it. And now I've been there for about 2 years. Day-to-day, my day-to-day is different every day. It's kind of hard to explain. I do work in the lab some. I manage some people, so I work very closely with them. And then what I'm working on, we're scaling up, so we're actually working on figuring out how to take it from the smaller R&D scale to the larger production scale, which has been really cool and something that I think is unique to a smaller company, really seeing it go from the R&D side to the more manufacturing side. And then I also was doing some traveling recently to clinical sites for a clinical trial, which also was very exciting and a little different.
Wonderful. Thank you guys. I have a bunch of questions on my sheet here. They span from just general, like how did chemical engineering prepare you for this, and to more biotech specific questions. I would love to get some audience questions to kind of see where we're at, if you guys have any. If not, I will ask my own. Yep.
Where's Graybug located?
We're in Baltimore. Yes. So I did not move very far.
All right, perfect. So with these general questions, I think it's okay if just a couple of you, 1 or 2 of you maybe answer. I think it'd be interesting to hear what the main day-to-day engineering skills you utilize in your position are.
Mine right now are really around problem solving and how you think. So while I'm not technically in the lab executing on an experiment, I've got a group of engineering scientists under me that are doing that work and troubleshooting every day, and that's very collaborative. But I really think it's the skills you learn while you're working in a lab. How do you collaborate? How do you talk to people? How do you negotiate time? and it sounds funny to say, but like engineering soft skills, which I think you're all getting here every day, learning, growing as team members. That's kind of my everyday use of it.
I'd say problem solving,
Yeah.
a big part of it. I mean, it's scale up, you know, mass balances, all that, you do use that, but I think problem solving is really a big one.
I've yet to derive Nebula Stokes anywhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the other stuff is, not to minimize it, but it's easier, or, I mean, that's like the training we've had, right? Or it's, you can also use the internet for things if you need it, so it's more the problem solving and logic kind of based things that I think are mostly used in the day-to-day. So.
Yeah, over there.
What type of roles do you usually see PhD graduates filling when they come into the company? And like, what
yeah.
experience do they have before that? Like, what does the company look for those jobs?
A lot of them could be postdocs. Maybe you want to speak to it. You have a PhD, but I've seen postdocs. Some will come in as like senior scientists, maybe managing, maybe not, owning a project.
Yeah, my company is very small, and right now we have the PhDs come in at the scientist or like associate scientist level, so we have kind of levels of scientists. But it's like a higher level, right, than if you just have a
Definitely not the
bachelor's or master's, and you're more either, if you're not right away leading a project, like gearing up to lead a project and managing people, and you're in more meetings and you're more involved in more of that kind of leadership or higher up stuff versus doing as much of the day-to-day lab work. And you might be like planning the experiments, but maybe not executing them yourself.
Mikey?
Did you guys ever feel like there was a disadvantage to having a PhD when finding a job in the workforce? Like as an example, like having less work experience than someone who like right out of undergrad went to work in a company for 4 to 5 years? Or was it like only just advantages to having a PhD?
I mean, so I will say everyone's PhD experience is very different. Mine, I would say, it was almost like a job, right? You're just working much longer hours and getting paid less. And it's a different environment in many ways, but it was still very much like a job. I mean, you come in, you have your plan of what you're going to do. You meet with people. You have your experiments that you're doing. You know, you have. So it's kind of like you're learning those skills and you're building up on that. And for me, it was kind of like, it's almost like the intro position at a job, kind of. Like, it seemed like a job to me. So I don't know, I wouldn't say that it was.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what the job is looking for too. I mean, I highly doubt that having a PhD is ever going to hinder you from finding a job. But you know, certain jobs want something a little more entry level, you know, and they want somebody who's going to learn and grow on the job or be more hands-on in the lab right away as opposed to maybe leading projects and stuff. So I think a lot of it depends on the matchup between your skill set and what they're looking for.
Our major biotech and pharma companies have to sponsor H-1Bs. I don't know if you come across as many internationals as do software companies, so I was just wondering.
My company has, it's gotten harder the last 6 months. We have a fair amount, especially for a small company, which I think has been unique. So I would say, don't let it stop you, but you might have a harder time. I think right now, unfortunately, in this climate, I don't know what
Big
you guys
Pharma is going to sponsor.
Yeah.
Roche, Genentech sponsored, Amgen sponsors, Celgene even, they're like a medium.
Yeah.
They sponsor. I'm assuming BMS does as well. So.
Okay, I had a biotech specific question. I would like to get into what influenced your guys' decisions to work at small or large versus large biotech companies or both, and what differences you think would be important for us to consider as we're trying to make that decision ourselves.
Yeah, mine was an interesting one. So Hopkins is pricey. And I really wanted the stability of maybe a bigger biotech job to kind of get my bearings and establish myself. And it allowed me to kind of grow in the science and understand it versus kind of the lab work I was doing at school and for my master's. And that piece, it's really different to do it in a pharma space. Just the work is different, what you have to present, and I've always been very late stage, and so how you interact with health authorities, and that's a training and a school in itself almost. So that was a nice kind of crash course in that. I think, and everyone is different. I reached a point where I was like, I really want different experiences, I really want to grow, I think I'm ready to do more different things. And that really drove me to look at Juno Therapeutics, new technology, really cool science, really awesome opportunities for maybe people like myself that didn't have 20 years of industry experience to kind of jump in a more lead role and really kind of spread my wings and soak up as much as I could. So that was the big driver for me to kind of pivot between the two. It was like kind of 10 years of big pharma training, and then I was able to kind of take that up here to kind of a small startup environment.
I kind of had a similar experience. I mean, I sort of fell into Amgen, but at the time there wasn't a ton of biotech in Seattle, and I really enjoyed the experience. It's a big company, but I learned a lot, and you get to see a lot from beginning to end, and you get to see a lot of drugs filed and that whole process, and interactions with regulators, and validating all your steps, so the regulators will, agree with your validation. And it's all very valuable experience. And then, but again, I did that for 11 years, and when some of my superiors at Amgen decided to spin off into this smaller company, it sounded really intriguing to me, and I really liked the mission, and I wanted the opportunity to work for a startup, and it's been great. It was kind of crazy at first, and there's still crazy days, and we end up doing all kinds of things, from moving lab equipment down the street to, some days you're like, I'm doing what? Oh, okay. Driving a big truck with lab equipment in the back, yeah, so it's been great.
Sure, go ahead.
I know that biotech can be pretty multidisciplinary. How would you rate the value of things like biology and physiology versus some of the more core engineering skills? How would you say that each are useful, less useful?
That's a good question. I would say, for me, even though I don't necessarily use my foundational chemie knowledge on a day-to-day basis anymore, I still felt like that was really important, and just kind of gave you that grounding. And then, because, for example, at Hopkins it was chemical and biomolecular engineering, so we got the exposure to the bio as well, but we still had that foundational chemical, whereas you can kind of spin it in any direction, but you still have that foundational knowledge, and then you can pick up the bio and that stuff later. I don't know. Like I said, I don't really use it on a regular basis anymore, but it just helped me learn how to think a certain way, and I think that's what I use now. And then, to me, not to diminish it, but I think the bio can be a little bit easier to pick up. And then also, bio is a huge, it encompasses so much, right? Where it's hard, you can kind of it's hard to pinpoint certain areas kind of as you're studying. But once you get into an area that you're working in, then you can kind of focus more on what you need. At least that's what I've feel.
Yeah, I feel like for us, both are important. And I think that our company kind of tries to hire a blend, not all one or the other. And each brings different views too. So I think there's value in having strengths from both sides. I don't know that you necessarily need one individual to be strong in both. I think,
Yeah, and I think as the therapies evolve, both are going to become more and more important. So if you look at cell therapy, and the drug you have on the end is not a purified antibody, it's kind of this living thing that is, can be from yourself, can be something else. That is where I see the blend really mattering. But again, to your point, you don't have to be strong 100% in both. But I think knowing that this industry is evolving and we're now kind of where antibodies were 30 years ago, where we've got this kind of new wave of stuff coming through. That's really exciting and really new and really cool, but not just one way, not just hardcore traditional engineering or bio, it's going to be both. So.
Piggybacking on that question, do you find that the companies typically encourage you to more specialize on one side, or do they encourage you to kind of learn both the bio and the engineering?
For cell therapy, I came in not knowing anything about cell therapy at all. I had done antibodies kind of my whole life before that. And the learning curve is very steep. And there is a requirement to understand that product from a biological perspective, not just how it's made, but why it's made and why we need it to be a certain way for the human response and what you're trying to get out of that product, especially in a filing kind of perspective, commercial perspective. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Some understanding of both
Yeah.
is good, but not that you're expected to be super strong in both. I think employers and companies, you specialize in something in school, and they know that that's going to be your specialty. But it's being able to understand the other side and some understanding and explain it and know how it's important to what you're doing, and I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. For example, I didn't know anything about the eye before I started at my company. I'd had a little bit of exposure because I actually worked in the Eye Institute at Hopkins, but the lung was my area of expertise. But I knew drug delivery, and I knew how to design things. So I had to learn about the eye, and then that's really important because you have to know what the target that you're designing for. So you would design things very differently for the eye than say for the lung. So you have to definitely know that area, but you bring the background that you have, and then you learn that on the job.
A lot of that is engineering, how you learn, how you solve problems. That's the same. I feel like it's applicable across.
It is interesting that all three of you described like growing and learning more, broadening your skill set as you worked, as opposed to I think like some people might think in a big pharma company you're like drilling down, you're becoming more specialized and less broad as time goes on. Okay. Another question I had is how has the relative instability of this field, I know with like Amgen leaving, you're starting startups, and maybe startups not doing so well, how has that affected your personal experience in biotech?
I think for me, at the time Amgen leaving, it was a little bit of a shock, but I think it's turned out great, and I think it's been pretty great for the area. There's been a lot of startups, and there's been some great companies, I think, that have been able to kind of recruit more people and get going, and I think in the end, I think it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really cool science happening right now, and so you're seeing more spin-offs, 10-year startups. I think Juno's story is like a funny one. We were Juno, and then we were acquired, and then a year later we were acquired, and so it's stable, I guess, compared to like a kind of volatile startup.
Yeah. I think in some ways startups are less scary than they were before. They're not necessarily stable, but now I feel like in the past startups would, at least this is my view of things, startups would be bought and then not anything would really happen with that, or you're out of a job, right? But now, if a big company buys you, you generally continue to exist in some form, maybe like under the parent company. So it's because they want to, they're buying the technology, but they're buying the people that know how to do that. So it's less uncertain and scary for the most part, I would say, now. But it was definitely something that I was thinking about when I was first looking at jobs, like kind of the risk benefit, a more stable position in a larger company.
Sure. Speaking to that volatility of the startups, how does that impact then the lengthy sort of clinical trial process to actually get these therapeutics and stuff approved by the FDA?
I would say if a company is, say, bought and it's in the middle of a clinical trial and things look promising, that it would continue, but I would say it's a case-to-case basis. I don't know if you can say exactly.
And that's really, I think, a negotiation with the FDA, with the MAA, with like global regulatory agencies, like changing what those requirements look like. I think no matter startup or big pharma, you're going to be held to a certain standard. And so you're kind of, no matter what, you're caught in, say, a lengthy clinical trial or whatever, because you want to demonstrate efficacy, you want to demonstrate safety. There are no ways around that, really, agile startup or not, so.
I have a question about just Biotherapeutics. How do you feel like, in both like having worked at Engine, how do you feel like, since your company is like focused on, providing low, I don't know how you phrased it, but yeah, lowering the cost of therapeutics and comparing to Engine, who's, in my view, a for-profit company. How do you feel like those experiences have been, like, in the people in the company and the way that, like, the people there are driven, like your experience comparing the two?
Just is a for-profit company also. They're just trying to reduce the initial cost. Actually, just kind of got started with, in combination with the Gates Foundation. And the founders actually originally wanted it to be non-profit, but I guess some of the Gates pushback was that they found that the nonprofits weren't moving fast enough. And so they thought a for-profit company could produce the technology they wanted with a quicker turnaround time, which makes sense. And so, I mean, what we're really trying to do is focus on technology development to really lower the cost of manufacturing, as well as molecular design. If you can design a molecule to be easy to manufacture, it's much cheaper to make. So I think those are kind of the two areas where we're really focused.
Rick?
So let's say you're in a startup company and then it gets acquired. Do you find that your marketability is more tailored towards other startups, or is the transition into big pharma just as easy, and vice versa?
You mean if I was going to look for a job now, or?
Yeah. So
Okay.
let's say you've had just startup experience, or you've only had big pharma, and then how is moving into the other?
I think both experiences are super helpful. I think wherever you go, wherever you choose to go, you're going to learn so much, big pharma or startup. Soak all of that up. Take that experience with you and show the value in what you learned there. I've never, in both ways, I've never seen it be an issue. Yeah. Yeah. There's no preference.
Sure.
Do you guys see PhDs doing internships, and how do people make breaks into the world?
Genetech, we had PhDs doing co-ops, or like, I guess they call them co-ops.
What's a co-op?
It's like a 6-month stint versus like a 3-month stint,
Okay.
or postdocs, things like that.
Yeah, big postdocs, co-ops.
Yeah.
Are they
It could be after graduation or during. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it's during.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I didn't do one, but I had some friends that did summer internships,
Yeah.
and I think they're becoming much more common than they were, and it takes less convincing of the advisor now than it used to, especially if, well, it depends on the advisor, but especially if you're something maybe that's more like translatable. So I have a friend who interned with the FDA, and another friend who just interned with like a pharma company, I don't know which one, so. I also had some friends that interned more with like the tech transfer office at the university, because they were interested in going to the patent side of things. It's actually in law school now for patent law, and then someone who also did something like more business. So I think the internships are becoming more of a thing than they used to be during PhD.
Sure.
I know that a lot of times because there can be like a lot of new things that are happening in biotech. How does your company handle benchmarking your developments versus other companies developing some products?
I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to know what other companies are doing because they don't want to share that, right? But you know, conferences is a big part of that. Going out and seeing what other people are presenting or willing to present on, or have posters about. So I think conferences, networking,
Keeping up with any like business releases,
papers,
Publishing,
yeah.
the company will publish
Yeah.
that they want to share, they'll publish that.
and indie patents.
Yeah.
Emily?
One of the biggest differences it seems from acting in the industry is regulations, right? So how do you go about switching your mindset from academia set to regulation set and industry set? Or even learn all of that field and navigating it?
So we have regulatory people and our quality people. I would say personally on the R&D side, things, at least at my company, aren't that different. Maybe things are a little bit stricter with like your PPE and stuff like that. But otherwise on the R&D side, it hasn't been that different for us. Once you start to produce, for example, we in-house make the product to test it's called GLP material. It's good laboratory practice material, and it's just like the very clean material that's used to test for animal safety. So we make that in-house, and you have to just document. It's a lot more documentation, I would say. You document everything, but someone knows what to do, and then they tell you what to do. So it's not like you would go in blind. But yeah, I'd say we have regulatory people, we have quality people that have been doing that for a long time, and then they are the ones that kind of have told us what to do, and we learn from them. So we always have those people.
Yeah, a lot of it's on the job, like when you're on projects and stuff, you're learning as you're going. You have mentors that kind of teach you that sort of thing. Kind of it trickles down.
Yeah, and I will say, a lot of my work has been very late stage development, and that a lot of that work is dictated by the regulations. And so you kind of are learning through the life cycle of the project and the program and the drug, what the regulatory agency needs to see to support you giving that to a patient in a commercial setting. And it's going to be pretty consistent across drugs, to be perfectly honest, but each drug is going to have its own like weirdness. And that comes, I think, with time and experience and kind of learning kind of life cycle of molecules and programs. And then there's a lot of, we do have regulatory quality folks that we work really closely with, a lot of guidances that are available. You'll hear people kind of quote, oh, that's ICH9, or that's, whatever it is, and you'll go in and you'll look and be like, oh, this is the framework for how I need to design this study to support this data actually going in a BLA. And that can sound really constraining, but I think it's also really cool because you know exactly why you're doing it, you know exactly where the data is going, and you want to know exactly what's going to happen on the back end. A patient is going to get that drug. And so I think that part of it is really cool. And so, yeah, we're not really like involved in setting the regulatory kind of guidance and framework, but all the work that we do, especially in that really late stage space, is really framed by that, even in development. So I think that part of it is really cool. Yeah.
All right, we have 3 minutes left. Any last questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, kind of jumping off of that question, in terms of intellectual property, how secretive are your companies, and what sort of things do they do to kind of keep their secrets?
Very secretive. Yeah. Very secretive. I'd say especially in this day and age because there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people in the same spaces. So
Just maybe a little more middle of the road. There's some things that are secretive, but they encourage going out and presenting and certain data encourage that. So it depends on what it is.
yeah, we definitely do have some presence at conferences and everything. It's just you're careful of what you say. Yeah.
So cell therapy, the space we're in now, it's I think very secretive per company.
As a final question. question. I was wondering if each of you could leave us with a final, just a takeaway, a final piece of advice for chemical engineering students, a quote that stuck with you through the ages, or even a recommendation that you really, enjoyed throughout your career.
I don't have a quote. One thing I would say is like your network is so important. How you establish that and maintain that, really, really grow that in your career. There are going to be people that you call on and that can help you with problems, when you're a manager, things like that. And then really jump at opportunities. No opportunity is too small, I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
I would say I really like something that a keynote speaker Cynthia said. She was talking about passion in the present, passion for what you're doing. I think that's really true. If you're passionate about the work that you're doing, then that shines through. And I think leaders in the company like to see that, and I think you'll go far if you're passionate about what you're doing.
I think I would say it's okay to not know what you want to do. I still sometimes feel like I don't know what I want to do. And it's fine. That's not, I feel like nowadays, especially with, this makes me sound old, but your generation, everyone's like starting companies, starting apps, doing all these crazy things, and it's okay not to be like that, and it's okay not to know what you want to do. And sometimes that's better because you can really learn about yourself and keep yourself open to more things than you maybe would have otherwise.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.